exalted future. Africa is a blessed threshold, as major actors in the Africa arena plot a renaissance towards common destiny. Let's pedal across the streams of yesterday, from the backstreets of Africa to the defining roles of policymakers, the political realities of the African nation, balance of power, and the strive to sustain national interest and identity. Join us on Network Africa on Channels Television. Network Africa, the rallying point for the emergence of a new Africa.
This week on Network Africa, tempers flare at the national conference.
Unless we want to disobey our president, then you can do whatever you want. And if you are pushed to the wall, we will easily walk out of this conference.
Hundreds of people get the death sentence in Egypt. Eyebrow-raising details spring up during the Oscar Pistorious trial.
The accused at that stage used his 4949 number, which is indicated as his official cell phone.
And there's a new perspective to what you probably tagged trash.
This so-called electronic waste is actually a resource. It becomes a resource when it is recycled in the correct way. So I won't call it a challenge, but I'll say the task ahead of us is to educate the population that recycling creates wealth and the waste is itself a resource.
Now, welcome to this episode of the program with me, Cynthia Are. Let's start things off right here in Nigeria. It sounded like a position being canvassed on behalf of a section of the North when the Lamido of Adamawa, northeastern Nigeria, His Royal Highness Dr. Muhammadu Barkindo Mustafa, dropped a bombshell informing the national conference audience that the region would simply stage a walkout of the conference if they were pushed to the wall. His reactions follow the Justice Idris Kutigi's question on whether the conference should call for a memoranda from the public on the voting pattern in decision-making for the conference.
Mr. Chairman, I and the people of Adamawa and many others have got somewhere to go. I am the Lamid of Adamawa, and my kingdom transcends Nigeria and Cameroon. The larger part of my kingdom is in the Republic of Cameroon. A part of that kingdom in Cameroon is called Adamawa State presently in Cameroon. So you see, if I run to that place, I will easily assimilate. But, Mr. Chairman, please, I want to plead to us. Mr. Chairman, I want to plead to us to strictly tread the path laid down by Mr. President in his address, which includes pattern of voting. Unless we want to disobey our president, then you can do whatever you want. And if you are pushed to the wall, we will easily walk out of this conference.
Now in Egypt, things seem to be taking a turn for the worse, especially as regards the judicial system. The prosecution of 919 suspected Islamists has been ordered in 2 mass trials just days after hundreds more were sentenced to death in a separate case. As expected, the criticism and condemnation came pouring in. The UN, US, and EU condemned the verdict in the previous trial delivered against 528 supporters of the ousted President Mohamed Morsi. The defendants in the new cases are to be tried on charges which include murder.
The mass trials and death sentences, which are literally the best in Egypt's modern history, are signs that the crackdown on Morsi's Brotherhood is intensifying ahead of presidential elections that Army Chief Field Marshal Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is expected to win.
We're extremely alarmed by this extraordinary case in Egypt where 529 people were handed down a death sentence after a trial that just lasted 2 days and breached a whole range of basic fair trial procedures. It's clearly in violation of international law.
The 70-year-old Brotherhood Supreme Guide Mohammed Badi and the others were tried in the same court. The verdict was quickly condemned, not only by foreign governments, but rights groups as well. The U.S. State Department spokeswoman Murray Harf was also quick to say what the situation represented: nothing but a flagrant disregard for basic standards of justice.
The verdicts handed down yesterday by the court and the commencement of another mass trial for 683 individuals today in the same court represent a flagrant disregard for basic standards of justice. The imposition of the death penalty for 529 defendants after a 2-day summary proceeding cannot be reconciled with Egypt's obligations under international human rights law, and its implementation of these sentences, as I said, would be unconscionable.
All the charges relate to clashes in Minya, a stronghold of Islamic support south of Cairo that broke out after security forces crushed the pro-Mercy camps in the capital. A policeman was killed during the protest. Defense lawyers boycotted the court session after complaining of irregularities and reporters being barred. Then a face-off ensued between security forces who fired tear gas, bird shots, and live rounds into the air, while protesters threw stones and set off fireworks. All these activities came about when the Muslim Brotherhood, to which Mohammed Morsi belonged, was declared a terrorist group. The government blames it and other Islamic groups for attacks on police and soldiers since Morsi was deposed. However, the Brotherhood says it is committed to peaceful activism.
Now, in spite of this disaster going on in Egypt, some people are not hiding their political ambitions in any way. Field Marshal Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has announced that he's resigned as Egypt's military chief in order to run for president. In a widely anticipated announcement, he made it clear that he was appearing in his military uniform for the very last time. Field Marshal Sisi led the overthrow of Islamist President Mohammed Morsi in July after mass opposition protests.
Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the Egyptian general who ousted his country's first freely elected leader, declared his candidacy on Wednesday for a presidential election he is expected to win easily. Sisi, who toppled the Muslim Brotherhood's Mohammed Morsi last July after mass protests against his rule, vowed to fight what he called the terrorist threat facing Egypt, a reference to attacks that have spiraled since last summer. If he is elected, as widely expected, it will mark a return to the days when Egypt was led by men from the military, a pattern interrupted by Morsi's 1 year in office after he won the first democratic presidential election. But many Egyptians welcomed the news. Since Morsi's removal from power, Egypt has suffered the worst internal strife in its modern history. There were reminders of the instability on Wednesday when one student was killed in protests at Cairo's university, ignited by a court's decision to sentence 529 members of the Muslim Brotherhood to death on Monday. The Brotherhood has been outlawed and driven underground since Morsi's ousting. The state has formally declared the movement, Egypt's best organized political party until last year, a terrorist group.
After the break on Network Africa, new eyebrow-raising details emerge as the Oscar Pistorious trial continues. Join me again in a moment for the details.
Many factors define your health. Some you can control, while others are simply beyond you. On Health News, we highlight all these factors and through medical experts provide information that will help you take informed decisions on healthy living, nutrition, and keeping fit. Get incisive health policy analysis. Health News, promoting good health.
Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa. Let's take a quick look at stories making rounds outside of the African continent. A Thai satellite has detected 300 objects in an area of the southern Indian Ocean being searched for the missing Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. The images were taken by the Thai Chote satellite on the 24th of March, just a day after images from a French satellite purported to show 122 floating objects. Flight MH370 disappeared on the 8th of March with 239 people on board, and no debris has been recovered from the ocean so far. Then, former Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko has said she plans to run for president of Ukraine in May elections. Ms. Tymoshenko was released from prison in February following the ousting of President Viktor Yanukovych after 3 years in jail. She's already served twice as Prime Minister and ran for president back in 2010. She was a major figure in the 2004 Orange Revolution that toppled Mr. Yanukovych's first administration. And US President Barack Obama says it was a great honor to meet Pope Francis for the first time during a European tour dominated by the crisis in Ukraine. He flew into Rome after 3 days of talks with world leaders in the Netherlands and Brussels.